This tiny little thing is called the Gamecube Nano, developed by two passionate individuals who go by the names Wesk and Crazy Gadget. Effectively, this is a full-on GameCube that's been reduced in size to resemble the Nintendo mini consoles. But the Gamecube Nano actually has a couple of standout features that make it even better than what's being offered by Nintendo themselves. So let's fire this thing up and take a look at what it can do. Before we dive into the features of the device though, let's take a moment to appreciate how cute this is. It's tiny, so you can get a sense of the scale. Here it is next to an actual GameCube console, here it is next to the official Nintendo mini consoles, and here it is next to a GameCube disc. Crazy stuff. It has a standard size HDMI video output on the back, along with a USB-C port which is used to power the device. And on the front it has 4 headphone jacks which is used to plug controllers into via these adapters. These are probably among the strangest wires I've ever seen. Never would I have thought I'd see the day where a headphone jack to a GameCube controller input was required, but here we are, I guess. If you're using your own plug socket to power the device, one thing to make sure is that your USB wall socket is actually powerful enough. I initially used a standard old Apple wall socket I had lying around, but it turns out that this isn't strong enough to power the unit. You need a socket that's at least a 5V 3A to provide the GameCube Nano with enough juice. I was also told to avoid plugging or unplugging a controller while the console was turned on in order to avoid blowing any of the internal components. So this is another little thing to keep your eye on while operating it too. But now that we've got everything plugged in, we're ready to turn this thing on and play some games, and this is where I became particularly impressed with what the GameCube Nano can do. Not only is the console this teeny tiny contraption, but it actually features real Nintendo hardware inside that's been trimmed down and reassembled in such a way that it can fit inside this tiny shell. This means that the games you're playing on the GameCube Nano aren't actually being emulated, but running natively just like they would on an actual console. Because of this, you're not going to encounter any glitches or emulation issues, and you're getting the true experience of what these games are actually like. This is particularly impressive considering that the actual Nintendo mini consoles don't even do this. They're just these little emulation machines, but this is the real deal. What makes this even more special is that, like I said earlier, the GameCube Nano has a HDMI output. The original GameCube, on the other hand, didn't have this, which means that the image quality you can get from the Nano is probably going to be better than what you can achieve with the actual console. That is, unless you've modded your GameCube or you have any fancy HD upscalers, of course. But then, even if you did happen to have one of these upscalers, the image quality you're getting from the Nano is still going to be pretty much on par. In fact, here's a comparison between the GameCube Nano's video output versus my Wii's video output using component cables upscaled by a RetroTink 2X. As you can see, the video coming from the Wii looks a lot softer and almost a little bit out of focus, whereas the GameCube Nano's video output is making everything look a lot sharper. Obviously, if you've got a different upscaler, maybe one that's a little bit newer, your results might vary with this, but either way, the video coming from the GameCube Nano is seriously impressive. When you turn the system on, you're greeted with something called RV Loader, which basically just acts as a simple but extremely easy to understand interface that displays all of the games that you've got on the SD card inside of the console. Don't worry about having to constantly take this SD card out either, because in order to customize your game library, all you need to do is plug the Nano into a PC using the same USB-C port which powers the device, and it'll be detected by your PC and you'll be able to drag and drop game files as you wish. Easy peasy. This is one of the major advantages that the GameCube Nano has over something like the mini SNES. Like, sure, you can put new games onto this thing if you go through the process of hacking it, but with the GameCube Nano, you don't need to do that. You just plug it into a PC and away you go. When you're on the game selection interface, you can press the B button on your controller, which enables you to tweak a few options, such as enabling cheats, changing your video mode to swap between PAL and NTSC if a game isn't running properly for some reason, and most importantly, you can force games to run in widescreen, even if they didn't support this officially. It doesn't just stretch the video and make it look all out of proportion either, it actually reformats the gameplay to display accurately in a 16:9 aspect ratio. Certain elements may not look quite right if you use this function, like menus and pre-rendered cutscenes for example, but from my experience using this, the gameplay itself looks amazing, and this is a pretty good quality of life improvement offered by the Nano. Now I have to admit, I've been holding out on you. There's one last major thing that the Gamecube Nano can do that makes it even better than it already is. The internals of the Nano are actually trimmed down from a Nintendo Wii, which of course can play GameCube games natively through backwards compatibility. However, this also means that the Gamecube Nano is not only a mini GameCube, but a mini Wii too. You can slap a Wii game on here and play it completely natively, just like with a GameCube game, opening up the library this console can play massively. Now, the version of the device that I was sent came with a bit of a caveat, which is that there's no Bluetooth receiver built in order to pair a Wiimote to the Nano. It also doesn't have the MX chip installed, which makes the GameCube compatible with the wireless Wavebird controller and makes the real-world timer used in games like Animal Crossing function. However, I have been told that every GameCube Nano will now come with these features installed. I just can't test them out for myself because I only have access to this sort of first print prototype unit. Luckily though, there is an option you can play around with on the game selection screen to enable something called GC to Wiimote, which maps a Wiimote's inputs to your standard GameCube controller, letting you play games like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which wasn't officially compatible with the GameCube controller, with a GameCube controller. Take that, Nintendo. Of course, another thing to point out is that a lot of Wii games were already compatible with the GameCube controller by default, so games like Super Smash Bros. Brawl or Mario Kart Wii don't even require any tinkering with settings at all if you wanted to use a GameCube controller. This is incredible, like seriously, hats off to the developers here, because what this thing can achieve while maintaining such an itsy bitsy form factor is mind-blowing. It's cute and it's powerful, just how I like it. There's only one major complaint I have with the GameCube Nano, and that is that it's pretty damn loud. The tiny fan inside this thing is working some serious overtime to keep everything cool. This is obviously a very excusable issue given that it's such a small console which is playing pretty graphically demanding games, but the only reason I bring this up at all is that it's literally the one single thing that stops this from being a near perfect device. If Wesk and Crazy Gadget come up with a way to make it quieter and let you disconnect a controller without risking blowing anything up, this would be the ultimate GameCube and Wii console for playing your game ROMs. Obviously, if you're more of a physical media connoisseur, then you should stick to the actual hardware and invest in stuff like console mods and upscalers, but for literally anybody else, this is absolutely nuts. This brings me on to the question you've probably been asking for a while now. How do you actually get your hands on this? Well, this is where things get a little bit complicated, because unlike with Nintendo and their mini console offerings, Wesk and Crazy Gadget don't have a production line where they can push out thousands upon thousands of systems. Each GameCube Nano is literally being made by hand, so your only option to get yourself a pre-built system is to reach out to Crazy Gadget and ask if he's willing to make you one on a commission basis. However, there's obviously no way that they can keep up with a lot of demand, so don't be disappointed if you can't get one using this method. The second, and probably more realistic option of getting your hands on one of these is that you'd need to actually build it for yourself by performing something called an Omega trim on a standard Nintendo Wii, and assembling some custom PCBs and then soldering everything together. Now this is way outside of my wheelhouse and sounds pretty complicated for somebody who doesn't have a clue with this sort of stuff. However, the instructions for the build and all of the files to 3D print your own Gamecube Nano are publicly available, and I'll link them in the description below. Overall though, this thing is absolutely awesome. What I love about it is that unlike with a lot of other tiny game consoles you see, this isn't just a novelty. Sure, stuff like the mini NES or even the mini PlayStation are cute and charming, but they're not something that I actually want to experience games on. The Gamecube Nano, on the other hand, feels like a much more legitimate method of playing your GameCube and Wii games, and because it features proper hardware and you're using an actual GameCube controller, something about it just feels way more authentic than basically anything outside of using an official console. Thanks so much to Wescan Crazy Gadget for sending us a Gamecube Nano to review. I'm legitimately going to be using this thing to replay some of my favourite Gamecube games. I'm super excited to see any future improvements made to the Nano, and also just to see what Wescan Crazy Gadget get up to in the future as well. If you want to stay up to date with them too, follow the socials that will be linked in the description. As always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a tiny bite-sized like, subscribe to see more retro content coming soon, and I've been Rob from Retro Dodo, and I'm off to play some Super Monkey Ball on my tiny GameCube. See you in the next one.